Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a reclusive widower living deep in the Oregon woods receives a cryptic letter from a nearby HOA, he thinks it's just bureaucratic nonsense. But when threats turn into sabotage and then arson, he's forced into a deadly game of power, lies, and fire, and he's not going down easy. When you live alone on 12 acres of Oregon woodland, you get used to silence. Not just quiet, but actual silence. The kind that lets you hear your own heartbeat when you're sipping coffee on the porch. That's why, when a manila envelope thumped into my rural mailbox on a random Tuesday morning, I noticed. No mail truck rumble, no footsteps, just the envelope. That kind of stealth doesn't happen by accident. The return address read Cedar Ridge Preserve, HOA. I frowned. My land wasn't in Cedar Ridge. It bordered them, sure, but the boundary line was older than the HOA itself. My grandfather had surveyed it in the 40s. I built my house here after my wife passed, designed it myself, timber-framed and fire-resistant from foundation to roof. I'd buried myself in building it, and when it was done, I buried myself in silence, until this envelope tried to drag me back out. Inside was a formal letter, printed on heavy stock, the kind lawyers and liars favor. In flowery legalese, they claimed that my spring-fed creek, my water source, was part of historically shared community grounds, and that a cadastral misclassification dating back to 1974 may have erroneously assigned ownership to your estate. They concluded by inviting me to voluntarily join Cedar Ridge HOA and enter a water access agreement for the benefit of the community. Generous. I read it twice, then laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the sheer audacity was so perfectly HOA. You could put these people in the middle of a desert and they'd find the scorpions for uneven paving stones. The next day, I sent a reply via certified mail. In it, I included copies of the deed, plat map, a notarized letter from the county registrar confirming my property lines, and a scanned version of a 2001 arbitration ruling that specifically settled this issue in my favor after the previous HOA. President made similar noises. It wasn't just ironclad, it was legal adamantium. I figured that would be the end of it. I figured wrong. 3 days later, I was adjusting the solar pump near the spring when I heard tires on gravel. A white Escalade pulled up just outside my gate, followed by a golf cart. Yes, a golf cart bearing two large men in HOA polos, and stepping out of the Escalade like she was arriving for a Vogue photo shoot in the forest, came Karen Grayson. Mid-50s, power blonde, manicured, like she never touched anything organic in her life. She didn't smile. She didn't introduce herself. She just raised a hand and said, "Mr. Ellison, we need to talk about the spring." I didn't invite them in. I let the gate stay shut. Not for sale, not negotiable, not your concern. Karen leaned against the gate like she owned it. We believe it's time for the community to reclaim shared resources. That spring's on my land, I said calmly. Your claim is fiction. The records are clear. Your last president tried this dance 23 years ago and lost. Read the attachments. Karen's lips curled. That ruling is outdated and irrelevant. The community's needs have evolved. You're a single homeowner blocking water access to over 50 families and to a regional wine cooperative that's bringing jobs to the area. I suggest you reconsider. I raised an eyebrow. So that's the real game. It's not about the community. It's about water contracts. Her henchman, the one with the clipboard, spoke up. We can offer a generous easement, $75,000, and a formal membership. I almost laughed again. I'd rather drink from a cactus. Karen's smile was thin, stretched like a rubber band about to snap. James, you seem like a reasonable man. But if you continue to be unreasonable, we'll find another way. I recommend you try legal. It'll be short. Karen stepped back, gave me a long stare, then nodded. Then we'll proceed accordingly. You've made your position clear. They left without another word. That night, I installed 3 more motion-triggered trail cams and backed up my entire security system to an encrypted off-site server. Just a hunch. But I'd worked too long in arson investigation to ignore the smell of smoke before the fire. And Cedar Ridge. They just lit the first match. The next few days were quiet, but the kind of quiet that felt loaded. I'd lived on this land long enough to know when the air got thick, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. It started with paperwork, lots of it. On Monday morning, I received a citation from the county planning office citing an anonymous complaint about an unauthorized structure built within 50 feet of a protected water feature. They included a blurry photo of my pump house, a pump house I'd permitted, inspected, and built 12 years ago. I sent them the full documentation, and my lawyer emailed the clerk with a polite message. Please stop wasting our time. Then came the environmental angle. 2 guys with clipboards and green polos showed up claiming to be with watershed safety volunteers. They didn't have badges, credentials, or real authority, just vests and boldness. They tried to take water samples from the spring until I told them they were trespassing and had 10 seconds to leave before they'd be walking out without shoelaces. They left. Fast. But the strangest part, that night, I found a scorched patch of grass at the edge of my eastern boundary, a 4-foot circle of charred ground, black and smoldering. It hadn't spread thanks to the damp soil and because I'd already cleared brush for fire season. There was no lightning, no campfires, no reason. I dug through the ashes. Someone had tried to light dry grass with accelerant, probably something cheap like gasoline. Sloppy, desperate. I reported it to the sheriff's office. A deputy came out the next morning, took photos, filled out a report, and left me with a vague, "We'll keep an eye on it." I'd worked in that department before retiring. I knew the game. Until someone got hurt, it was just vandalism. But I wasn't waiting for flames to hit my porch. I activated a secondary system of covert trail cams. Ones I'd kept stored for hunting season, placed them along the eastern and southern fence lines, hidden in rock piles, brush, and birdhouses. All motion activated, all cloud synced. I also started a log of every incident, the date, time, detail, and my response, not just for police, but for court, if it came to that, which it would. Then came the message. I was sitting at my kitchen table Thursday night, reviewing fire maps on my tablet, when my phone buzzed. It was a text, no caller ID, just a message. You should have taken the offer. You don't want to lose everything. No threats, no names, just implication and timing. I snapped a screenshot and forwarded it to my lawyer and the sheriff's office. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the gun safe, pulled out the 12 gauge, loaded it, and leaned it by the back door. That same night, around 2:15 a.m., I caught movement on the southern cam. A figure, hooded, crouched, sneaking near the creek bed. They had something in their hand, maybe a bottle. But the cam's IR caught the reflection just enough. They didn't enter the property, just stood there, looking at the water, then retreated. They were watching. The next day, I paid a drone surveyor to do a full sweep of my property from above. I wanted aerial records. I wanted timestamps. I wanted everything, and I was starting to understand just how far they'd go. The "we'll find another way" threat from Karen wasn't just talk. These weren't angry letters or HOA fines. This was heat, real heat, and the burn was coming. I didn't wake up to sirens. I woke up to the smell of smoke. It was thick in the air, acrid, chemical, burning, but distant enough that my smoke detectors hadn't gone off. I grabbed the flashlight from my nightstand, stepped out onto the porch, and looked south, toward Cedar Ridge. The horizon flickered orange. A fire. By the time I reached my truck, I could already hear the wail of fire engines in the valley. I stood on the hill behind my house and watched the glow intensify behind the tree line. Whatever was burning, it was big. Too big to be brush. At 3:57 a.m., my phone buzzed with a news alert. House fire reported at Cedar Ridge Preserve. Emergency units responding. Then another. Homeowner hospitalized with minor burns. Fire officials investigating possible arson. I didn't need to guess whose house it was. By 6 a.m., I was already getting calls. One from my lawyer, one from a local reporter, and then at 6:43, 3 sheriff's deputies and an investigator from the state fire marshal's office showed up at my gate. "Mr. Ellison," the lead deputy said, "we have a signed statement and visual identification from a homeowner at Cedar Ridge alleging you were seen leaving the area shortly before the fire started. We have a warrant to search your premises for accelerants and materials related to ignition." Behind them stood Karen Grayson. She looked too composed. Her hair was singed and damp from what must have been a post-fire rinse, but her expression was icy, precise. She pointed at me like a monarch directing a beheading. "That's him. I saw him," she said. "He was on my property. He threatened me last week. He told me I'd regret not backing off." Then he burned my home down. It was a performance, not frantic, not hysterical, scripted. I didn't flinch. I've been home all night, alone. We'll need to verify that, the deputy said. Do you have surveillance? Plenty. While they fanned out with gloves and flashlights, the investigator took notes as I walked him through my system. Camera placements, retention times, timestamps synced to UTC via cellular backup. I didn't tell him about the off-site backups yet. Let's see if they'd try anything funny first. They collected 2 pairs of boots, my fireproof gloves, and a portable fuel tank I kept for the generator. Standard procedure. Nothing that worried me. What got under my skin was how Karen lingered. She didn't watch the search. She watched me, like she was expecting me to panic. Her burns were minor, superficial. She had a bandage on one arm and a visible smudge on her neck. But her eyes were sparkling with the kind of righteousness only sociopaths and televangelists can pull off. You should have taken the offer, she said quietly, once we were alone. I smiled at her. You should have worn less flammable pajamas. The investigator overheard that and gave me a side glance. Let him. I wasn't here to impress anyone. By 9:30 a.m., the search team wrapped up. They left with evidence bags, but no arrest. I wasn't charged yet, but they made it clear the investigation was ongoing. By noon, I was already on the news. Local Channel 5 ran a segment titled HOA President's Home Destroyed, Neighbor Under Suspicion. They played up Karen's quotes, left mine out entirely. My face, blurred but still recognizable, was in the background of every shot taken that morning. Then came the door knockers. Journalists, curious neighbors. One man from the local paper even asked me, "What do you have against the HOA, Mr. Ellison?" Like I was some unhinged pyromaniac who hated rules and yard signs. I didn't answer. I went inside, sat at my desk, and opened the security archives. I had nothing to hide. I had everything to show. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was worried. I wasn't. I'd been through fire investigations, watched innocent people buckle under pressure, watched guilty ones fold too late. I knew the steps, the mistakes, the timing, and I wasn't making any of them. By dawn, I was at my workstation pulling up the footage. I started with the perimeter cams. Front gate, untouched. Motion sensor, no activity between 10:15 p.m. and 7:30 a.m. South fence line, no movement. West trail, quiet. Nothing came in, nothing went out. Then I checked the interior cams. Living room, kitchen, hallway. I was there, moving from couch to fridge, brushing my teeth, switching off the lights. 10:22 p.m., bedroom door closes. After that, just static views of a man dead asleep. Still, I needed more. I opened the backup server interface from the off-site data center I'd subscribed to after the first grass fire, pulled the encrypted timestamps, synced everything with national time servers down to the second. No chance they'd say I edited anything. Then came the GPS logs. My Apple Watch never left the house. From 11 p.m. to 6:52 a.m., my biometrics read like a sleep study. Heart rate, movement, respiration. I'd been in REM sleep when Karen's house caught fire, deep enough to miss it completely. But it was the trail cam at the south fence line that made me pause. At 3:27 a.m., just 15 minutes before Cedar Ridge lit up, the camera triggered. I pulled up the frame. A figure, hooded, thin, walking fast, almost jogging, away from the HOA path and toward the trees. In their left hand, a gas can. No question. Their right hand held something, probably a lighter. The resolution wasn't high enough for facial ID, but the body type, the gait, slim, female, fast. And then the kicker, the figure didn't come from my land. It came from Cedar Ridge, from behind Karen's own house. I timestamped the footage, cross-referenced the glow of fire rising 15 minutes later, and packaged the data into one neat, labeled evidence packet. Then I called my lawyer. By 10 a.m., we were at the sheriff's office. My attorney, Rachel Niles, sharp, no-nonsense, former prosecutor, laid out the documents like she was preparing for court, which, frankly, she was. First came the GPS logs, then the off-site video server with full forensic chain of custody, then the footage of the hooded figure, then the metadata logs from my watch, synced health app reports, router logs, and a signed affidavit from my neighbor 2 parcels over, confirming he saw no lights or movement on my property all night. The fire investigator, the one who'd come with the deputies, sat stone-faced through it all. When Rachel finished, she leaned forward and said, "You had probable cause yesterday." Today, you have probable innocence and a potential counterclaim for defamation and malicious prosecution. The sheriff looked less sure of himself than he had the day before. Still, no apologies, just a nod. We'll need to verify everything. Good, I said, you should. That evening, Karen held a press conference. That's right, a press conference. In front of the smoldering remains of her house with a bandage on her arm and what I suspected was a borrowed neck brace. She told the cameras I was a bitter, unstable neighbor, that I'd threatened her family, talked about burning things, and that I had a history of violent behavior. She even managed to squeeze out a tear. I sat in my living room and watched it play on Channel 5 with a cold beer in one hand and the raw video from my South Trail cam playing on a loop on my phone. The story was changing, but not in the way she hoped. It only took 48 hours for the fire marshal's office to call back, and this time their tone was very different. They wanted to talk again, privately, at their office. I drove down the next morning, where a younger investigator named Callahan sat me down with a folder in front of him. He didn't make small talk, just opened the file and slid over a series of photographs, close-ups of charred floorboards, residue swabs, melted plastic fragments. Then he dropped the hammer. We found gasoline traces throughout the structure. Kitchen, living room, hallway, multiple ignition points, not accidental, not electrical. I didn't say a word. He flipped another photo, a lab report. The accelerant used was an ethanol gasoline blend, pretty common. But here's the kicker. This sample had a specific stabilizing agent, brand exclusive, one that's only sold in a particular fuel chain. He slid a printed receipt toward me. Karen Grayson purchased 2 gallons of that exact blend from a Green Stop station Tuesday night, 2100 hours, paid with a card in her name. Cameras confirm. That same fuel brand. It was the only one within 30 miles that included the stabilizer in question. I knew, because I used a different chain altogether. Always had. My generator ran on diesel. Callahan looked up. Now, we also found a half-melted plastic gas can under what used to be her porch. Label still partially intact. Same brand. Lot code matches a shipment delivered to that station 2 days earlier. I nodded. So what are you saying? We're saying this doesn't look like arson from outside. It looks like insurance fraud. My lawyer and I met the sheriff later that day and submitted a formal counterclaim. Criminal defamation, false accusation, and attempted fraud by deception. The sheriff's office began internal review. The DA's office quietly started sniffing around. I knew the rhythm. It wouldn't take long now, but it got better. Rachel dug into Karen's property insurance. Public records showed her policy was recently updated, just 2 weeks before the fire. Her coverage had doubled in that update. The payout she was seeking, over $900,000, nearly twice the home's estimated market value. Even better, she transferred almost $200,000 in crypto to an offshore wallet 2 days before the fire. Rachel obtained the transaction logs through a forensic audit request. The timing wasn't suspicious. It was surgical. We shared all this with the sheriff's office, and within 24 hours, Karen's name was added to a grand jury preliminary inquiry. It wasn't public yet, but the writing was on the wall. That's when I got a call from a woman in California. Middle-aged voice, nervous tone, said she saw the story on the news and recognized Karen. She did this before, the woman said. To a house in San Luis Obispo, 2016. Fire started in the laundry room. She got a big payout and moved away. We never proved anything, but everyone knew. Rachel dug further. Turns out the previous insurance company that paid Karen in California had flagged the claim as suspicious, but unresolved. They didn't pursue charges, just paid and closed it. It was easier, but we weren't going to make it easy this time. While we were collecting evidence, Cedar Ridge Preserve HOA tried to act like nothing had happened. They issued a statement distancing themselves from Karen, claiming they had no involvement in her personal misfortunes. That would have been fine if we hadn't discovered emails between Karen and 2 board members discussing the spring and a necessary strategy to pressure Mr. Ellison into cooperation. We subpoenaed those emails. They landed like dynamite. Turns out Karen had been working on this long before she ever met me. She targeted my land, my water rights, and cooked up the HOA leverage as a way to bleed me into compliance. When that didn't work, she upped the stakes, then lit the match. They arrested her during an emergency HOA board meeting. I didn't plan it. I didn't even know about it until Rachel called me, voice sharp with restrained satisfaction. She's in custody, she said. Charges are formal: fraud, arson, false statements to law enforcement, and attempted insurance crime. 4 felonies. No bail. I drove into town later that day to get supplies, coffee, lumber, trail cam batteries, and passed by the sheriff's department on the way back. Her Escalade was still in the impound lot, the same one she rolled up in when she tried to tell me how community needed water. It looked smaller now, surrounded by mud-streaked patrol cars and a busted Ford pickup. Fitting. The official press release hit local media within hours. HOA president arrested in connection with suspicious fire. Possible insurance fraud alleged. No mention of me. No more blurry mugshots of my face on the news. Just Karen wearing an orange jumpsuit and looking a lot less polished than usual. The best part, the sheriff's office held their own press conference and publicly cleared my name. Mr. Ellison has been ruled out as a suspect, the sheriff stated flatly. We appreciate his cooperation and the clarity his documentation provided. A fancy way of saying, we screwed up, but thanks for not torching us for it. But Karen wasn't the only problem. Cedar Ridge Preserve HOA was panicking. Their president was in jail. Their emails were now court evidence, and members were quitting the board like rats jumping from a burning deck. I heard from a local contractor that several prospective homebuyers backed out of deals once the news spread. Who wants to move into a place run by arsonists and fraudsters? Then the unexpected happened. The county announced that they were opening an official audit into the HOA's finances and land dealings. Apparently, a former board treasurer, one of the few people with a conscience, had come forward with documents showing shady real estate arrangements. Specifically, HOA attempts to reclassify parcels they didn't own as shared green space to qualify for federal improvement grants. Guess which spring-fed boundary line showed up in those records? Mine. Rachel filed a civil suit the same week Karen was indicted. It named not only her, but the HOA itself and 2 of the remaining board members. Grounds: defamation, false reporting, harassment, attempted property fraud, and emotional distress. We requested damages in excess of $600,000. The HOA's insurance company tried to reach out quietly to settle. We didn't respond. I wanted them in court. I wanted them on record. And just to make sure they stayed nervous, we included a copy of one of the HOA's internal memos, recovered from Karen's personal email. It was short but deadly. If Ellison doesn't agree, we need to create pressure. We can't lose access to that water. A smoking gun, simple, brutal, and legally devastating. Meanwhile, the HOA tried to hold itself together with duct tape and delusion. A hastily appointed interim president wrote a newsletter full of hollow apologies and laughable statements like, "We are proud of our long-standing commitment to ethical governance." I printed it, rolled it up, and used it to start my fireplace. 1 week later, a county inspector visited my property. Not to harass me. This time it was different. He shook my hand, apologized on behalf of the office for the nuisance complaints, and informed me that the county would formally affirm my land boundaries on record, marking them as permanently uncontested. "You've been more than patient," he said. "We're cleaning house." I believed him. HOA's lawyer tried one last stunt, filed a motion claiming Karen acted independently and without the board's knowledge. But Rachel came prepared. She presented a string of emails, signed contracts, and the HOA's own bylaws showing that Karen never acted alone. Everything had been voted on. Sometimes with only 2 people present, sure, but that didn't change the fact the HOA had empowered her. And now they would share her downfall. The first court date came faster than anyone expected. Karen appeared in a red jumpsuit this time. County had run out of orange ones, I guess, and she looked like someone had drained her dry. No more designer scarves or pearl earrings. Her hair was flat, her hands trembling slightly as she was escorted into the courtroom. No cameras allowed, just murmurs, rustling paper, and a very tired judge. I sat 2 rows behind the prosecution. Rachel beside me, laptop open, her fingers flying like machine fire across the keys. She whispered, "They're arguing bail again." Karen's attorney, a sharp-nosed man from Phoenix with a fake accent and real desperation, stood up and gave the performance of his life. Claimed Karen was being unfairly targeted, that she acted in the best interest of her community, and that no clear motive for arson exists. It might have worked, if not for what came next. The prosecutor calmly stood, walked to the table, and played a video. Surveillance footage. Green Stop gas station, Tuesday night. Karen in yoga pants and a hoodie, loading 2 gas cans into her trunk. Next video. Dash cam footage from a neighbor's car. Karen walking toward her porch that same night, carrying one can, the other already gone. Time-stamped, verified, cross-referenced with fire ignition estimates. Third video, interior trail cam, mine, showing the flicker of light starting behind her guest house and the distinct whoosh of combustion. Fire took off fast, too fast, like it had help. The judge denied bail. Karen broke into tears. Her lawyer didn't look surprised. Meanwhile, Cedar Ridge Preserve HOA was in free fall. The county's audit uncovered multiple violations, misuse of funds, retroactive paperwork for permits that never existed, even a hidden slush account used for member initiatives that was actually paying for Karen's home renovations. New kitchen tiles, imported marble, Italian light fixtures paid for by HOA dues. Residents were furious. One by one, homeowners started organizing, not just to remove the board, but to formally dissolve the HOA altogether. In the state of Arizona, that required a 66% majority of homeowners to vote in favor. Within 2 weeks, they had 74% and climbing. I got a knock at my gate one afternoon, a woman I'd never met. Mid-40s, holding a box and a clipboard. She looked embarrassed. "Mr. Ellison," she said, "I just wanted to say, I voted yes to dissolve the HOA. And I wanted to return this." She handed me the box. Inside, a rusted padlock with HOA access only engraved on the side. We didn't know what she was doing. Most of us didn't, but we let her. That was our mistake. I nodded and took it. "You doing all right out there?" She exhaled. "Better now. Thank you for fighting." Funny thing was, I never wanted to fight. I just wanted my land, my peace, my spring. But when you're backed into a corner by liars, thieves, and petty tyrants with clipboards, sometimes you have to remind them that real power doesn't come from titles. It comes from truth. By the time the next hearing rolled around, Karen had been formally indicted on 5 felony counts: arson, attempted insurance fraud, criminal conspiracy, falsifying evidence, and abuse of authority. 3 board members were named as co-conspirators. 2 fled the state. 1 turned himself in and took a deal, and that's when Rachel delivered the final blow. We filed a federal complaint. Because Karen's insurance claim had crossed state lines, she used an out-of-state holding company and transferred funds via crypto exchanges registered in Delaware and Wyoming. Her fraud technically violated federal statutes on wire fraud and interstate criminal activity. Translation, it wasn't just a state case anymore, it was federal. The feds moved faster than expected. Sealed warrants became unsealed. A federal grand jury was scheduled. Karen was now facing not just prison, but potentially decades in a federal facility without early release. I slept better that night than I had in months. The federal trial took nearly 4 months to prepare. During that time, I watched Cedar Ridge Preserve crumble into something unrecognizable. The signs at the entrance were stripped bare. The community pool chained shut, and the once manicured walking trails left to grow wild. Without dues, and with most of the board under indictment, there was no one left to keep up the illusion. Karen's trial was moved to the federal courthouse in Phoenix. Rachel and I made the drive together. 3 hours of desert highway under a sky so sharp and blue it looked like it could cut you. Outside the courthouse, there were no reporters shouting questions, no gawkers, just the quiet hum of air conditioning units and the occasional shuffle of security boots. Inside, the jury was all business. 12 ordinary people who probably never thought they'd be deciding the fate of a suburban HOA president. The prosecution didn't waste time. They painted Karen as the architect of a deliberate campaign to harass, defraud, and ultimately destroy anything standing between her and control over that spring on my land. They had everything: the memos, the bank transfers, the gas station footage, the internal HOA minutes, and the cherry on top, testimony from her own vice president, who flipped in exchange for a lighter sentence. Karen's defense tried to spin it, claimed she was pressured by the community, that she was protecting neighborhood resources. But every time they tried to soften her image, another piece of hard evidence hit like a hammer. The jury didn't flinch. The verdict came on a Wednesday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. The judge, a stone-faced woman who clearly had no patience for suburban power games, didn't hold back. "This court has rarely seen such a flagrant abuse of a position of trust," she said. "You weaponized an association against your neighbors, destroyed property, and attempted to manipulate the justice system for personal gain. Sentence: 21 years in federal prison without parole for the first 15. Restitution $612,000 to me for damages and legal costs, plus additional payments to other victims as determined by the civil suit still pending. When the gavel came down, Karen didn't cry this time. She just stared straight ahead, jaw tight, like she'd swallowed something sharp. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt lighter, not happy. There's nothing happy about watching someone's life collapse, even if they earned it, but free. The weight of her interference, her false accusations, the constant tension, it was gone. A month later, the civil case concluded. The HOA as a legal entity ceased to exist. The remaining assets, 2 maintenance trucks, a riding mower, and about $42,000 in the bank, were liquidated and split among the former members after debts were settled. I got my check in the mail with a note from the court clerk. Congratulations on your victory. Not many win against an HOA. I kept it simple after that. Replaced the old fence along the north boundary with a reinforced one. Repainted the gate. Added more cameras, not because I was expecting trouble, but because I'd learned trouble often shows up when you least expect it. One evening, about 6 months after the trial, I walked down to the spring. The water was clear, cold, and running strong. No noise but the soft rush over the rocks. No footprints but mine. For the first time in years, it truly felt like mine again. I'd fought them, and I'd won. And not just for me. For everyone who's ever had to stand up to petty tyrants in pressed suits and sensible shoes, thinking their title gave them the right to take what wasn't theirs. Sometimes the system works, but only if you make it.